Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever type of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. This show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon, USA studios. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. Tonight we're going to talk about Rwanda and a whole bunch of other related stuff, because my guest again, for the second time, he was on last month and he was so interesting and so delightful, we had to have him come back again and finish what he was talking about. Chris Thorne, thank you for coming on.
The hand that shook Nelson Mandela's.
Yes, yeah, you're going to say more about that later on as the show goes on. So what we're going to do now is do an abbreviated version of what I call the bio segment, and we'll talk a little bit about who he is personally so you get an idea, because people who see this show may not have seen part one. This is part two.
Right.
And so, and you feeling pretty good now?
I feel good, yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, me too.
I generally feel good.
And I was just so charmed, and so was my crew. It's unusual. My crew universally said last time, you got to have that guy on again. And it's unusual, so I'm very, and they're pretty smart.
I'm complimented, that's great.
You better believe it. So let's see, let's talk, do an abbreviated version of who you are before we go into the subject, because Rwanda, a Bittersweet Experience, Part 2. And you'll talk a little bit about what that title means later on.
Okay.
So, and you remember these questions? You want to recite from the top of your head, or shall I ask you these questions?
Ask the questions.
Yeah. And if I would ask your best friend, who is Chris, what would your best friend say? Chris is. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
You can't use the same answer.
Okay.
Of course you can.
What would he say? My best friend would probably say, well, he talks a lot, but he also listens a lot, and you can count on him. That's they say, who is Chris Thorne?
Yeah.
He'll be there when you need him, which is what friends are all about, I guess.
Excellent, excellent. And when and where were you born?
I was born in Charleston, West Virginia in 1937. Mm-hmm. Like I said last time, that makes me your younger brother.
And you have a funny look about you. What about your racial or cultural heritage that has you looking the way that you do, Chris?
A thumbnail sketch. All right, let's see. My father's from Barbados, which has been for several hundred years a multicultural experience, community.
Is he white, black, or brown, or mixed?
He's brown. He's about the same color I am, maybe a little bit lighter, I don't know. Yeah, a little bit lighter, I guess. Uh-huh. But like I said, there are a whole lot of white folks back there in the genealogy. I just haven't ever met any of them because they're ways back. And my mom, her family's from Virginia, migrated into what became West Virginia and then into central and southern Ohio. But basically the family is situated in Virginia and West Virginia. Uh-huh. And we were in New York because that's where my dad took us before my brother was old enough to go to segregated schools. My dad said he was taking us back to the city where he grew up because he came to the States as an orphan when he was about 6 years old.
How come you don't talk like the people in Virginia? You talk like a New Yorker.
Well, that's because I grew up in New York. I came to New York when I was 3 years old, and I didn't leave until I was 15, 16 years old.
Did they ran you out?
No, I ran myself out. I figured it was probably the best thing for me to do if I wanted to live to see 20. I might be better to go someplace that the traffic wasn't so fast.
All right. Religious preference. Did you say anything about that last time?
I have none.
Did you ever have one?
I was christened as an Episcopalian. That's like the Anglican Church, I guess, in America. Mm-hmm. And my parents were always people who were looking around and asking questions and investigating stuff. So we moved to the Baha'i faith when I was about 8 or 9. But in the Baha'i faith, you reach a point in adolescence when you have to declare yourself. That was the word I was searching for the last time. You have to declare yourself, and you have to go before a community of the elders in that particular chapter of the Baha'i Church, in New York, in this case, and tell them why you want to be a Baha'i. Well, I wasn't sure I wanted to be, so I never declared myself and just went off wandering and cherry picking my way through various religious philosophies, getting rid of the dogma and the pedantic stuff, and basically looking more at the philosophies and picking the best parts of whichever ones appeal to me.
So you're a-religious.
Yeah, I can even be irreligious sometimes, but
I know.
but yeah, I really don't care about. I think religion, a lot of harm's been done in the name of them all.
How about good that's been done in the name of religion?
Well, I think that they have served purposes, especially for times of need for great numbers of people, in the African American experience, the slave experience. The church was an anchor, became an anchor, and held on as an anchor. So it fed a particular need that helped us not only survive, but persevere.
Talking about religion, are we going to do a duet on Amazing Grace before the show is over?
Not me. I would not assault that beautiful song. I am not a singer. I'm one of those guys who thinks he sounds pretty good with the acoustics of a shower. But no.
Yeah. How about your formal education? Make a few comments about that. You've got a lot of that behind you.
Yeah, well, I've been to a lot of different schools. I've never graduated from much of anything. I told you the last time my only piece of paper, as it were, not a sheepskin, because it's from graduating from completing the 8th grade, as I said last time, at the top of my class, at Public School 69 in Jackson Heights, New York. The rest of it, City College, West Virginia State College, Ferris Institute, or Ferris State University, or whatever it is now, Harvard, all of that is, never finished them. Had a good time. Got a great education. I thought, all of those experiences helped me as I was moving through life.
Yeah. And how did you arrive at your intelligence now? Because of all the schools you went to, or did mom and dad give you something that was unusual?
I got a big head start. I come from a family that is peopled by, my mom's a library scientist, my dad's English and Romance languages kind of professor. He's earned his spurs coming up through the New York school system and ended up in administration, which he had a particular talent for, and it was always debate time around the dinner table. That's the only time that we really got together. My grandmother came up and stayed with us during the Second World War, so she was a big formative influence. But dinner time, everybody got together for dinner, and you had to bring your stuff to the table. If you wanted to raise a point or debate a point, you needed to know what you were talking about. And you also had to know the meaning of the words you used. Don't use words you don't understand.
And you got that all the while when you're growing up?
I call it mother's milk, father's beer, whatever you want to call it, from the time I can remember, those kinds of conversations. But they didn't just happen at the dinner table. It was about just about everything we went through. You were not going to get away with making a statement that you really hadn't thought about. And you were asking me why I seem to always have an answer for something. Well, you get used to thinking about stuff. And it's a family of fast-thinking people. My brother was one of these off-the-charts geniuses. I learned to read upside down, because my dad would read to the two of us across the table. And my brother learned how to read, watching his head and his eyes and what he was doing, and figured out what he was doing. He could go through books like this, my brother, and tell you paragraph, page, all that stuff.
Brothers and sisters, how many of those do you have?
I have an elder brother and a younger sister.
Are they as smart as you?
Well, I don't know about how smart any of us are in real terms. I don't know. In practical terms, I'm probably well ahead of the rest of the pack, but that's only because of my life experience. My brother did all kinds of stuff, went to graduate school in Europe, and he went to school. I mean, he breezed through, but he spent the time in school, just about anything he wanted to do. And my sister wasn't that much interested. She became a clerk stenographer, and then actually had was head of a team of court stenographers in an appellate court or something in New York City.
You've had a rich life, huh?
Who? Them?
You have.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. You gotta keep moving.
You're a delight to talk about anything with, you know. Yeah. We're going to talk a lot in the second half of the show about what you did in your work life and what you're starting in your retirement life or continuing your retirement life. And you had a partner or have a partner?
Yes, I do. Yeah. 31 years.
31 years. Yeah. Does she like you?
Sometimes.
He's never at a loss for words.
It would be. It could be described as a tempestuous relationship, but it has tempered over. We're getting older now, you know. But when in the early days, it was kind of rough. We bounced off each other a bit.
Yeah. Children.
My wife and I have a daughter, and I have 2 sons from my first marriage and 1 son from in between marriages. So I have 3 sons and a daughter.
The last time I talked to you about your political persuasion, you weren't sure. You were being evasive, or you didn't.
No, I wasn't. I've never been accused of being evasive. You're the first.
Projecting.
Yeah, I don't know what you were doing. But no, I don't belong to any political party because I just don't believe in all that stuff. I judge people by what they do. What they say they're going to do, it doesn't mean diddly squat. What I look at is people's track record, what they have done up to the point that they're asking for me to vote for them or to support them or whatever, all right? Today, I was immensely proud. I listened to the President of the United States, an articulate, intelligent president, defending an action that he took and defending it well. It's such a change from at least 2 of the last presidents that we've had. Okay, here was a man who not only knew what he wanted to do and has done a lot of what he wanted to do in spite of an enormous amount of resistance, but he was able to articulate that. And he's a counterpuncher. I love counterpunchers. All right, sluggers they're okay, but my dad took me boxing matches when I was a little kid a lot, and because he liked boxing, and counterpunches are something special.
So you're on the left or the right of the political continuum?
I put myself pretty much on the left, yeah.
Of course, I know the answer to that when I asked it.
Yeah, but it's kind of a mixture, because I don't want to get into heavy discussions about whether communism makes sense or capitalism makes sense.
Sure.
All right, neither one of them, the way they're practiced, makes any sense at all.
Yes.
All right, but I do believe that the answer does lie somewhere between the 2 of them, in a dynamic kind of socialism. All right. And by dynamic, I mean one where you can actually, there's nothing wrong with making money. It's when money takes over. It's when it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. So when it becomes the love of money rather than money as a tool, and the fact that the way to make more is to share and reinvest, not only in things that will earn more money, but investing in the people who are basically the ones who are doing the work that makes the money that you use as tools to expand. So all of that in a dynamic socialism, all of that, there's a place for all of that.
Is that going on in any country in the world today?
I think some of the Scandinavian countries have come fairly close to it. It can be a pretty expensive proposition.
Of course.
In the sense that the government needs a lot of revenue to use, let's say, use a percentage of the revenue that they have, a larger percentage, to make sure that the people in the society can move forward as well, and can have, whether you call it a safety net or insurance that is positive and constructive, so that they can build and rebuild their lives if they fall and hurt themselves.
Where does America stand on the political continuum overall? Left,
it's
right, socialist, corporate capitalism?
It's corporate capitalism right now.
Doesn't that work pretty well?
Yeah. No, I don't think it works at all. As a matter of fact, we're watching the European Union sow the seeds of its own destruction. They're turning Greece into a client state. Oh, but what I wanted to say to them is welcome to Niggerville, because that's what the IMF has been doing and the World Bank has been doing throughout Africa for 50 years.
Uh-huh.
It's called structured, what is it called? SAP. Structural Adjustment Program.
Is a structural adjustment going on in America today?
Subtle. I would put another S in front of it. Is all kinds of adjustments that go on simply because of the racism that we have in this country.
Where is America going to be 20 years from now in terms of what we're talking about now, and racism and crony capitalism, all those kinds of things?
I'm not sure.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think we could really lose it all. You know, we are coming dangerously close to being open to fascism, right? To being open to people who are, what do you call them, plutarchs, who are who do not rely on fact and logic and rationality and reason, but they want you to be either afraid and divided or whatever. And you have more and more people who are becoming less and less aware of what's going on around them because of the manipulation of the media, the manipulation of all of the media.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So that, you say 20 years, it could go down very quickly. And 20 years doesn't mean a lot to me. Most of the people in my family cash in at around 100 years old. My mother is 100 years old this year. My dad died when he was 98. Both of my maternal grandmother and great-grandmother died at 103. And I tell people that means that at 77, you're going to have to put up with me for another 30 years. So 20 years from now, if I decide to stick around, I could see where that 20 years is. Maybe I don't want to. Maybe I don't want to.
Wow. Profound thinking.
I don't know how profound it is, but it's definitely there. It's
so you talked about you're irreligious, and yet you consider philosophy as a guideline or some sort of thing that you think is important for you to consider how you live your life. Which philosophy would you embrace or follow, so to speak? That's quite an ambitious question.
No, it is an ambitious question. And if I think about it, I think that there are a number of different kinds of philosophies that are appealing, but I think in a large general sense,
yes,
that Buddhist philosophy, I think, is probably, with an exception for reincarnation, I told you before, since I'm not conscious of it, and I know I could get there if I wanted to spend a lot more time in meditation than I have time to spend. But holding that off to the side, the reincarnation thing, that entire concept of making yourself more aware of the transparency, the transience, and the temporary nature of everything that's in this experience of ours, that appeals to me. And it's happened to me in my life. I've lost everything that I've had 2 or 3 times in my life. I mean, just wiped out, gone, taken away. Once in South Africa and a couple of other places, where, you know, just all of the things that I had accumulated over time, some of which I attached a great deal of sentimental importance to. It doesn't mean anything. It's gone.
But you don't give up.
I don't really know what those words mean. You got a Bayesian raised in New York City as an orphan, okay, by a maiden aunt who didn't give him a whole lot of slack, taught him the meaning of $1. You know, you go out and you're going to have to earn your pocket money, that kind of lady. And a mom who comes from the stiff-necked, notoriously stiff-necked people of Appalachia and Virginia. Hard. People who came through the slavery experience and came out of it arrogant and uppity. Right? I mean, so you're talking to me about giving up? I don't have any idea. It's not part of my lexicon. That's probably what did me in at the Rwanda experience, is that I refused to give up.
Oh, well, we're going to get to the Rwanda experience in a few minutes. But for now, how about any persons from history or even alive today that you particularly admire or admired or look up to? Any names come to mind?
Yeah, well, we talked about that before, and that was the one question you asked me in the first interview that
Yes, I did.
kind of stumped me. And one of the names I put forward was a living guy, and that's Wynton Marsalis, because I would really love to be able to sit down and talk with.
Why?
Because he is he's a Renaissance man. He's, and people say, well, Renaissance men did a lot of different things, and so does Wynton Marsalis. All right. Not only is he an incredible musician with an incredible heritage as a part of a musical family, all of whom are fantastic, not performers, but fantastic musicians in the truest sense of the word.
Wouldn't a Renaissance be considered a Renaissance man for something more than just music?
No, it would be. That's why they usually use the term to talk about a lot of things. He's also an administrator. He's also participated in making films. He's done a lot of different things with his life that's outside of strictly playing his instrument beautifully, right?
You've mentioned a few people in the past of some note who you met personally or shook hands with.
Well, if you want to get really historical, and I mean time machine kind of stuff, I would love to be able to talk with Gautama the Buddha, because I think he's misrepresented by a lot of the people who are so-called practicing Buddhism today. One of the things he said in his teachings, not his writings, because he's like Jesus in a way. He didn't write anything, he taught people.
Yeah.
Right? So what they've done with what he taught was you got the kernel, you got the core substance of what he was saying, but then people did things with that have nothing to do with what he taught. He organized religion was the antithesis of what Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha taught. He said, you don't go out and proselytize, you live your life. And by the way you live your life, people will ask you how you achieve this kind of stability, this kind of positivity, this kind of whatever it is that they think you have, that they want, this kind of peace, this kind of how did you find your center and stuff. And when you explain the ways you did that, they are going to come to the teachings of the Buddha, right? And I think that's cool. Okay, and people just screwed it around. We're never going to know what Jesus said or meant or anything. That's been twitched out of almost any kind of comprehension. I mean, in, what's the name of there's a musical, Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
And what do they sing in Gethsemane, in the garden? They say, we want to, and then we'll sit around and write the Gospels, and they'll remember us forever. And nothing could be closer to the truth, what actually happened. And it became a political statement before, it got twitched out of it. That was not what, I'd like to talk to him too. He must have been kind of cool. He had a lot of courage.
Yeah.
It was a bad time to be seditious.
How do you live your life on a day-to-day, ongoing basis in your relationship with other human beings? What's your philosophy? What's your living, acting, walking the talk philosophy? That's a leading question because that evolved one for me. You want to know mine?
Yeah.
Be nice.
That's kind of hard for me.
I'll bet.
I can't always be nice. No, I can't always be nice.
I didn't say always be nice.
Oh, you said be nice. Try to be nice.
No, I didn't say try to be nice.
You said be nice.
You got it. And you can do the same thing to me that I'm doing to you right now. Quizzing you.
You mean like, how do you practice being nice to everybody? I've been in situations where being nice to people can literally get you your butt whipped.
What you're doing is redefining what I'm saying
All
in order to reject it. Okay, read the book I gave you.
I'm going to read it. I've got a bit on my plate right now. All right.
And I'm wanting to learn some more from you, from what you are and how you arrived at where you are.
Hey, I want to enjoy my life and day to day. I want to be in the moment most of the time. I don't want to spend a lot of time about thinking what's going to happen tomorrow and what am I going to do even at 12 o'clock at 5:30 in the morning. I don't wake up thinking about what I'm going to be doing at 12. I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing at 5:30. Am I going to be getting up or am I going to lie around today for the next hour?
I love it.
All right, but when I get out into the world, it's basically don't hurt anybody unless they try to hurt you, and then hurt them bad.
An eye for an eye?
No.
Hurt him back.
You want to make sure that the people who, for whatever reason, decide they're going to do damage to you or your family, you make sure that those people will reconsider that for the rest of their days. Seriously.
You and I can go on this banter.
Oh yeah, right.
Forever.
Right,
So
because I know that that's not the way you consider living your life. I told you that basically, Buddhist philosophy and the art of war, Sun Tzu's Art of War, are two of the pillars of my getting through the world, on the basis of the way the world is.
Yeah.
It's one of the only reasons that I'm sitting here talking to you now is because of that approach.
Uh-huh. So,
yes.
Mr. Director, shall we stop? Because him and I got to go in here for another 3 hours if you don't stop us. Shall we take a break? He says yes.
Okay.
So we'll take a break and the mics will be off. Okay, looks like we're back. Thanks for staying tuned and not running away. For those who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there, and like my guest, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk some more further about Rwanda, a bittersweet experience. This is part 2. And now my guest, Chris, is going to talk a little bit more about what we talked about in the first show about a month ago. And then we'll continue on and see what else we can add.
Okay.
You and I can talk about something forever.
Well, we keep going off on tangents. We're both easily distracted by interesting statements made each to the other. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's the risk we take when we get into open conversation.
Did you know that I'm looking to learn something more from you?
What do you want to learn? I don't know how much.
I'm not sure what you can.
Okay.
But your style and what you're about and how you think and your opinions and views and how you think more than anything else.
Is that why you asked me? How do I get through it each day, or what do I do?
Yeah, those kinds of things off the top of my head.
Being nice it's maybe a part of the equation. I try to be nice sometimes.
Okay.
But I to be very honest with you, I'm not really that much concerned. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've bounced around most of my life.
Love your neighbor. Never mind, let me stop this. Let's continue on what we're supposed to be talking about, Chris, because you're so provocative. You're going to talk a little bit about your work and what you've done most of your life before we go into the details of what this show is about.
I won't go into the detail. I give you a thumbnail sketch. I left home when I was about 15 and a half. I went out to live with a close family, friends. They were like aunt and uncle, but not blood relatives, who were in Arizona. My uncle was the head of radiology department at a small hospital outside of Tucson, and it's the only alias I have. He said I was his son from back east and jacked my age up by a couple of years, put me to work in the X-ray darkroom, where I learned X-ray darkroom technology. My father had said I had to go live with somebody he respected, etc., and stay for no less than 6 months, which is what I did, and then I hit the road. And for the next year and a half, I worked my way up the West Coast, doing odd jobs, picking shovel stuff, picking beans and other things, and just, food for work kinds of stuff, bumming. And then finally returned home, tried to get back into school, did get back into school. I went up to Michigan to Ferris Institute. and was getting into trouble up there. I went to the school psychologist. He called me in and said, "What's the matter with you? You get straight A's." So I said, "I'm bored." He said, No, I do my homework in 45 minutes. I'm out of there. And he said, "Well, why don't you just go to college?" I said, "Why do you think I'm here? This is a college prep department that I'm in." So he said, at that time, before the standardized, before the SAT and stuff.
Yeah.
There was the California college qualification tests were the precursors. I blew the top out of it, so they let me into college at what was then Ferris Institute, became Ferris State College, and then Ferris State University or something like that. But anyway, I didn't want to stay there because they basically were a pharmacy school. Went down to West Virginia, blah, blah, blah. Went to West Virginia State for over a period of several years because I'd drop out and work for a year and come back and that kind of stuff. But I was in a hospital recovering from the repair of a hernia operation, and I decided I wasn't getting I didn't have enough discipline to go anywhere and do anything in my life. So I joined the Army. And I was in the Army for 3 years, 3 months, 14 days, and 10 hours. I learned a lot, traveled around, went to the Far East, went to Southeast Asia, went to a number of different places in that experience.
Southeast Asia?
I was on TDY there. We had TDY assignments during the early 60s that went all over the place.
Oh, sure. What'd you do in the Army?
Infantry. That's what I wanted to do. I did not want, they offered me language school. I turned it down. And because what I wanted to do is to get away from, all of this academic stuff that I was surrounded by every time I came back into my home environment. I could not move without bumping into that stuff. I said, well, if I want to get some discipline, let me go to something that's completely different.
Is that why you called yourself a warrior?
See, I have to watch
during the break.
During the break. No, I would describe myself, quintessentially, that I'm a good part warrior. Big part of me is a warrior, but that does not mean, a lot of people think that means that I'm going to go running around slashing and jumping and stuff like that. A warrior mentality is more, I think, more along the Bushido code or the code of the samurai than it would be any of the gaming kinds of slash, burn, kill, stuff like that. You have to go deeper into that and find out what samurai were all about what the basic philosophy was and what the basic tenets of the Bushido code are, to understand what that means. And it's a strength, and a lot of Buddhism in that says you have to center yourself, okay? And that's the kind of warrior, but that's a part of who I am. It may be a part of the core, but it's a part of who I am. Mm-hmm. And it comes from the African American experience. It comes from being an African American, born into apartheid America, and growing up in apartheid America.
Are you going to see the end of apartheid in America?
I would hope so, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I think it's the marrow of the bones of this society. Yeah, I know. That's exactly the way I feel about it too. I just don't. I internalize a lot of that stuff.
So continue with your description of your
right.
work
Okay,
experience.
I came back out of the Army, and I went back to West Virginia State College to finish my degree, and met the lady who would become my first wife, and she rather quickly bore me 2 sons. And I was working as, you should pardon the expression, President Obama turns around and said, I was a community organizer in the so-called war on poverty. I say so-called because it was really a strange war. No casualties, and all of the warriors were going to be Lochinvar come out of the West or something, and there were a lot of casualties, and there were not a lot of Lochinvars. But anyway, I had worked myself out of a job in the community that I was sent in to help organize. They were saying, sit down, Chris, we can handle this, which is the sign that you've done your job right.
Sure.
And a friend of mine came back from Washington and had gone up there to argue about a grant. We did a lot of time negotiating grants for more money for our little Appalachian youth and community development project. And he said, hey, I ran across a guy who said, this is a great program. You can, he said, you've been in the Army and you spent some time in Southeast Asia. And I said, yeah. And he said, they're looking for people with military experience, but who have done development work as well. I said, fine. I went up there, went in for an interview, and the next thing I knew, I was getting ready to go to language school. I asked to go straight over. And I got into a class with about 80 guys, 60 to 80 guys, all of whom were guys who'd asked to go straight over. And when I got to Vietnam with this group, and we got dispersed, I ran into people who'd gone through the same entry program called the Vietnam Express. That should have been my first notice, alarm notice. And they all told me that they had asked to go to language school, and they sent them right over. And that was my first real dealing outside of the Army with government. All right. So I spent 2 years there. A very interesting and informative 2 years. I talked a little bit about it the first year we spent as a district senior advisor in Tukor. It's in Tukor, outside of Nha Trang, which is a beautiful city. If you ever get a chance, it's now a big resort area, but it's just a gorgeous part of the country. And at any rate, the second year I was part of an ambassadorial evaluation team, a flying squad of evaluators that went around the country poking holes in people's ego balloons and stuff like that, showing them, showing what was wrong with the programs and recommending what should be done to set them straight. All of that is part of what was building this experiential bank of knowledge that I was going to be using later in everything that I ever did in my life. Okay.
So how did they decide, the people in charge or the people managing what you were doing, how did they figure that you were capable of doing what you did? Did they give you a battery of tests?
No, it was coincidental. At the time in our training, we had 90% of what we were learning was language in Hawaii. Beautiful place to learn language. Beautiful place to do anything, as a matter of fact. But
yes, yes.
I envy my daughter. She's there now. At any rate, part of it was teaching. You have to teach. A lot of these guys had never done any briefings or anything like that, but I had. Mm-hmm. I had training and briefings in school, in ROTC and stuff like that. So
yeah.
And as I was beginning to give my briefing, two guys walked in and sat down in the back of the room. One very short guy, and a big kind of soft-looking guy. And after the briefing was over, and I gave a military briefing, which blew everybody away, because military briefings, you can say, if you've got a specific subject that you have to deal with, you can pretty much put all the information out there in 10 to 15 minutes. And you can evaluate yourself immediately, because at the end you say, are there any questions? And you can tell from the questions whether or not you covered the field well enough. Mm-hmm. There were no questions. Okay? So after the thing was over, the guys came over to me, and one guy introduced himself, and he said, my name's Danny Whitfield. I am a civilian province assistant. I'm assistant to the senior province advisor, who is a colonel. I said, yeah, that's interesting. And he said, and this is Colonel John Van, who was retired at that time, but was an iconic figure in Vietnam. Anybody who knew anything about Vietnam knew about John Van. You read The Bright and Shining Lie, and that's John Van in every sense of the word. At any rate, and Whitfield said to me, where'd you learn how to do that? And I told him what my background was, and he said, okay. He said, they're going to try to hold you in Saigon, and I'm up country. If you get into any situation where they're going to hold you there, let me know. And I said, okay, and I did, because they wanted to make me a briefing officer in Saigon, which is the last thing in the world that I wanted to do in Vietnam, was be a briefing officer. Every Friday, get up there and tell lies about how well the war is going. So I sent a cable up to Whitfield, and I said, they're doing it. He said, no, they're not. And 24 hours later, I was on a heli headed up to Nha Trang. I hardly had enough time to pack my clothes, but I was getting used to packing my clothes quickly anyway. And I stayed there for a year. And I ended up on the ambassadorial, it was Ambassador Comer's evaluation team, called the Pacification Studies Group. Mm-hmm. And he came to visit, he was doing a tour, and came to visit my district. And we came out, and when I met him, I introduced him to the Special Forces A-Team commander and the district chief, and all of the people who were there, the Korean battalion commander, the people who were part of the coalition in my district.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what do you want? You want the $2.50 tour, the $1.75 tour, or the 50-cent tour? He said, how long does that $2.75 tour take? I said, take about 4 hours. He said, I don't have enough time for that. Well, he stayed for 3.5 hours, and we went everywhere. We were standing at one point in front of a maternity dispensary that we had just finished building. I had a detachment of CBs that was under my command, so to speak, if you can have CBs under your command.
This is in Nha Trang?
No, this was outside of Nha Trang,
okay,
at this district capital called Nha Trang. And in Nha Trang, about 60 kilometers outside of Nha Trang. Anyway, and as we were coming out, he said, you know, you've got a really cushy job. He said, this must be the most secure place that I've been in Vietnam. And at that time, one of his 4 gunships that were flying escort came over, right over at treetop level. And I said, you're right, Mr. Ambassador. I would assume that at this point in time, this is the safest place in Vietnam. And he laughed. When he was getting on his chopper, he said, how long you been here? I said, about 10 months. He said, and what do you want to do at the end of a year? I said, do my 2nd year. I like being here. He said, no, you're going to come work for me. I said, with all due respect, sir, I'd rather not. To the day that the year was up, I got a call, come, pack your bags, you're going to Saigon. And I spent the rest of the time bumping around the country, turning over stones and opening closet doors.
Straighten your jacket because you're hiding your vest better now. Now we can still, I want to be sure, and I don't want to miss anything.
No, I understand. Okay. So anyway, came back from Vietnam, and I'm trying to get to where we are now. And they wanted to send me back. I wonder if I do it this way. This is really homegrown TV, isn't it?
Yeah, now you got it. You're okay.
I hope that works. Anyway, now,
it's
is that better?
It's fine, thank you.
Okay, now, they wanted me to go back to Vietnam. I said, no way, Jose, not me. I have been there, done that, and I ain't going back. And I also found out my first brush with the government telling you one thing and then doing another, making promises that they probably never, ever intended to keep. But a buddy of mine, a guy who had been in language training with me and had literally gotten drafted into the Army out of the language school, called me, and he was a very young assistant secretary at Health, Education, and Welfare. Mm-hmm. And to cut that short, I ended up working in the office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation. And
in Washington?
Yeah, at the time that Nixon was president. It was a little hotbed of liberal intrigue in the midst of Nixonian presidency. At any rate, I did that for a couple of years, and during those 2 years I did something that nobody had ever done before, evidently. I put together a program called Programs Evaluation by Summer Interns, Pepsi. And it was the first time that anybody had done a nationwide evaluation of social services, evaluation by the people who were the consumers of those services.
Sure.
All right? And we did it. It was incredible. It was an incredible exercise. And that's how I got to go to Harvard. I got recruited because one of my interns in that program went back. He was a law student, second-year law student. He went back, and all he could talk about, according to the recruiter, all he could talk about was this great, crazy-ass African-American who's running this program in the middle of the Nixon administration.
Watch your language, okay.
Okay. And
you know...
And that's how I did that.
We've got about 10 minutes left for you to talk some more about whatever else.
I can't imagine. You get me into these things and you talk about what's your work experience.
You're going to talk about the fish farm, are you?
Well, God, yeah, I can talk about the fish farm.
If you want, if you think it's useful. I just want to be sure because...
I think the fish farm, when you talk about Rwanda, a bittersweet experience.
Yes.
But you keep asking me questions that draw me out into these things, right?
Yeah, because you're so darn interesting.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, I already, in our first interview, I talked about why I got interested in fish farming in the first place, back in Lesotho, 1976. And I spent a lot of time researching aquaculture and learning about fish, and every place I was posted, I'd find people who were involved in that stuff, and that went on. And it was something I wanted to do. And I went from health education and welfare, and then I resigned in protest of the Nixon pardon. And then I went out and I did consultancies for a while, and I went to Lesotho, and that's where I sort of fell in love with or got involved in this whole aquaculture stuff and development stuff. And I came back from there, and I got a job with the UN, and I spent almost 18 years working with the UN and still doing the same kind of thing.
18 years?
Almost 17 plus several months, but almost 18 years all over the joint. Places nobody else wanted to go to work. I love those places. One thing, it keeps the headquarters fools off your back. At any rate, it keeps you off your back most of the time anyway. Okay. And I met my wife, who was also working for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. I was in northeastern Nigeria, and she was in northern Cameroon. And we were repatriating Chadian refugees from those two and 3 other countries surrounding Chad, one of the several repatriations.
Some serious work.
Yeah, serious work. And as serious as you want to make it. We got married. She has wanted to go back to Rwanda. She left in 1959.
That was her home.
That was her home, and she had left during the first genocide, the one that I told you last time nobody really knows about, where 200,000 people were killed and 1.2 million people went into exile in the 5 surrounding countries and Europe and Canada and the United States, North America. And she'd wanted to get home. She had grown up in Burundi, had gone to Paris to get her master's, and then gone into the UN. Anyway, as I said in the first interview, my dad told me that a gentleman always sees his lady home. And I was tired of working for the UNHCR. I'm just tired of the UN in general. That's another interview section. At any rate, so when we finally got the room to go back, all hell broke loose first in Burundi, and we took three of our nieces and actually adopted them to make sure that if anything happened to the parents, that there would be no problems with us keeping the kids with us and taking them on with us.
Sure.
And it got to be 1996 before we could go back. And I went back thinking all I want to do is help my daughter learn about that part of our family and help her get into and hopefully through her adolescence and without too many mishaps and build a fish farm. And then I found one that was already built, and that was Kigimbe Fish Farm. It had been, I looked at everything that was there in Rwanda, and in '96 it was still pretty hot up in the northwestern part of the country. But it was also very cold in the northwestern part of the country. That's where the highest hills are.
Yes. And
that's not good for raising tilapia or raising fish generally in ponds. They don't like to breed in the cold. Not too many animals do. And the last place I ever went to was because of the last place I stopped was at the university, and at the university they said, why don't you go out to Kigimbe and look at that? It was the old National Fish Station. And I walked up, I was with my brother-in-law, who's Burundian, and he's fluent in French but doesn't speak much English, and I'm fluent in English and Vietnamese, and I don't speak French, so we said the same thing in each language when we saw the place, when we finally got a panoramic view of the place. He said, c'est un rêve, and I said, it's a dream.
Really?
And it's 126 ponds, 32 of those ponds in 2 lines, 17 ponds and 15 ponds. The average size of those 32 production ponds average size, 50 meters wide and 100 meters long, can hold an average of 8,000 fish. The Belgians had built it in the bad old days, 1954.
Yeah, during the occupation.
And you can argue with their business practices, which is slavery and abuse, all right? But the design is a masterpiece. It's gravity-fed, completely gravity-fed. The biggest problem with fish farming is moving water.
Yeah.
And in the United States, it's the most expensive part of a fish farming operation because you got to move the water with pumps because they build them in the delta where there's no gravity feeds.
Yeah.
All right? And you don't see them a lot any place out of Asia. I hadn't seen them in very many places, and nothing as big as this. Any place I'd ever been in sub-Saharan Africa. I said, why do I want to spend the money? Because I'd taken half of my pension fund as a lump sum to have money to build a fish farm. I said, why do I want to do that? Are we running out of time?
About 3 minutes left.
You see that? Well, stay tuned, folks. I don't know what to tell you because that's just the beginning of that. And
so that was a success.
Well, we got into it, and it took us 3 years to get on the ground, from 96 to 99. That should have been my first inclination that this was, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. They were digging out of a deep hole in Rwanda. The country was in ruins, all right. But I said, I'm going to do this thing, and it was a privatization project. So I learned how to write business plans, and I wrote a business plan, and nobody else had written a business plan. It's not like I feel like I was really that great winning the competition. There was no competition. Everybody else just wanted to put their money on the table. So I got the farm, and they kept log rolling. It kept time. They dealt us what should have been a death blow by lying to us about, well, not lying to us. They let us get all the way to and sign the lease and then told us that they had reduced the amount of time that we had for the lease. Okay, we asked for 30 years for the lease. And they said, well, we can't do that, 15 years. And that's where I made my first mistake. The lawyer that I was doing pro bono work in country, he looked at it and said, it looks like a good contract to me. All right? We signed the contract. I paid $20,000 for the first year's lease fee, which was exorbitant, but it didn't make any difference because I knew we could really roll it over. And then we went back to the banks that had told us that we would have to use, that we wanted to use the fish farm as collateral for the loan that we needed, about $500,000. We got there and they told us, oh, didn't anybody tell you that anything that's less than 18 years cannot be used, the lease of less than 18 years cannot be used as collateral.
Oh. So no money.
I was committed in contract. I'd already put 20 grand on the table to show good faith on my part. Bam, and that was just the beginning. And I gave you a thing of paper that a couple of pages that show you exactly what went on after that.
What's going on with it now today?
Nothing. They forced us out.
Fallow or what?
No, they forced us out, and I think they're grazing cows in it now.
Oh my gosh.
I know they had a big flood because they didn't take care of the diversions that basically feed 20% of the rivers that join and run through the valley. They didn't take care of them. They didn't know what to do with it. They wanted me to end up working for them, and I wasn't going to do that. They never thought I'd leave.
So it's been some time since you were involved there.
Yeah, right. We left in, I took them to court. I sued for $5 million.
In what court?
In the Rwandan court. It's the only court there was.
Yeah.
And people said, why did you do that? I said, because if I don't do this, they will always say, well, if he'd gone to the court, he would have found justice. No, I spent 5 years in that legal system, all the way up to and including their Supreme Court. And during that time, I got, with the exception of one American ambassador, one senior representative who was one of the most professional ambassadors I've ever known or worked with in all of my experience bumping around. A guy named George Staples. I'll never forget him. He was incredible. And the rest of the guys, it's hard for me not to not to get bleeped out.
What are you doing in your life today?
Kicking back. I told you that the last time we talked.
I know. I wanted to hear it again.
Yeah, I'm kicking back. I'm just relaxing right now.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with relaxing.
Uh-huh.
I'm going out to the coast. I've never seen the Oregon coast.
Oh.
When I came through here when I was 17 years old, it was all straight up through Portland and up to the north.
Okay, let's stop talking because we're going forever and ever. But I want you to talk to my viewers and which camera in number 3 and tell them whatever you want to tell them right now. You got about a minute or so.
I apologize for being so easily distracted, and I would hope that I get invited back sometime, if only to deal with the specifics of what happened, because I think it would be an eye-opener. I really believe that people need to know more about what our government does and what international agencies do, and in this case, what the Rwandan government did and did not do. And I think that all of those things would be good for you to know. And I spent 15 years in Rwanda.
Thank you.
I'll see you.
Again, it's been a delight. And if you play your cards right, and we can persuade you to come back again and one more time. You're such a delight to visit with.
All right, listen. Yeah, give your viewers a bit of a break, all right? You know.
So do you have some PSAs for us, Mr. E? Yeah, to watch my shows on the web, Google Don Baham YouTube. There's hundreds of shows on there through the years. All sorts of interesting characters I've interviewed through the years. And I got to tell you about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Our civil liberties in this country are in jeopardy because the right-leaning tendencies of our government joined the ACLU. Oh, we got to end corporate personhood. Corporations are not people, and money is not a speech. So thanks again, and I'm sure glad that you watched because I had a good time. Oh, we've got to tell you about remembering KFC. Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. John's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, and be friendly, and be charitable. To you too. And you too. And you too, Mike. And you too out there.